think outside the box. Mnemosyne, mother of the arts. Before I start reading this, I'm going to warn you that I plan on interjecting, deviating from the script. Because the more I've meditated on this, the more I've realized the importance of this story for all of us. But I'll start simply. To retell this story, which is in itself about retelling stories, we have to start near the beginning of creation itself. In the time when Uranos, the Greek god of the heavens, and Gaia, the Greek goddess of the earth, bore a child named Mnemosyne, a Titaness, due to her lineage. Many of the Titans suffered an unfortunate fate. Many were killed, many were sent to Tartarus by Zeus and his siblings in the great war known as the Titanomachy. However, Zeus did spare quite a few of his uncles and aunts, and he also did engage in sexual congress with many of his aunts, as he did with his sisters and many a mortal woman. Mnemosyne shared that same fate. To quote Hesiod from Theogony, "For 9 nights did wise Zeus lie with her, entering her holy body remote from the immortals. And when a year was past, and the seasons had come round as the months waned, and many days were accomplished, she bare 9 daughters, all of one mind, whose hearts are set upon song, and their spirit free from care, a little way from the topmost peak of snowy Olympus." 9 daughters, 9 days. 9 muses. So, who are our 9 muses? We have Calliope, who is the muse of epic poetry. Think Iliad, Odyssey, Mahabharata, Ramayana, Gilgamesh. Clio, the muse of history. Epic poetry is allowed to be creative and imaginative. Clio, we're being serious and realistic here with Clio. Euterpe, the muse of music. And if you know anything about tetrahydrocannabinol chemistry, you might have heard of terpenes. Terpenes get their name from Euterpe. Erato, lyric poetry. So here we're going more into music than we are. We can see that Erato and Euterpe share the same kind of relationship as Clio and Calliope. Melpomene is tragedy. And further down the list we will come to Thalia, which is comedy. And I'll talk about tragedy and comedy from a Greek perspective when I talk about Thalia. Polyhymnia. Hymn, as in a hymn, which is something we sing. Poly means many, so polyhymnia, many singing. Terpsichore, we get terpe from Euterpe music. Terpsichore is the muse of dance. So we have music and dance. All these are interconnected, these sisters. Thalia. As I said before, Melpomene is tragedy, Thalia is comedy. And in a Greek perspective, these have very, very definitive meanings. In the Greek context, a comedy is any story that ends better than it started. Simple as that. A tragedy is any story that ends worse than it started. Comedy is like this on the plane of happiness, right? If the access here is happiness, this is comedy, this is tragedy. One story ends in suffering, the other ends in happiness, remittance, happily ever after, whatever you want. So that is the relationship between Melpomene and Thalia. And finally, the one of these 9 muses that I love, because she doesn't have a pair. She is like the unpaired sister, the lost sister out. Urania, the muse of astronomy. And one will also recognize that Urania is also related to Uranus. So there's a little cycle there. Plato also, our good friend Plato, via Socrates, who wrote all of Plato's works, right? I'm sorry. I just did that backwards. Oh my God. Sorry. Plato wrote all of Socrates' works. My bad. But Plato quietly suggested that the poet Sappho of Lesbos would be considered the 10th muse, which is pretty high praise from the philosopher himself. And if you have never had the pleasure of reading the few surviving works of Sappho that we have, I don't think you will be a worse person for reading them. But if Mnemosyne is so related to the arts, as understood by the ancient Greeks, what does she represent herself? If you've ever used a mnemonic device to memorize anything, righty-tighty, lefty-loosey, Roy G. Biv, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet, the colors of the spectrum of the rainbow. Okay, there's another one. There's tons of these little things that we memorize to remember things. What are they called? They're called mnemonics. From Mnemosyne. That's also where we get the word memory. It's where we get the word meme from. Now that that's become the meme that we all understand. So that's the point. Okay? She is memory, especially oral memory. Because her cult is ancient Greek. It's before written Greek. So how do you remember your stories, your culture, your traditions? Well, you have to pass them on orally. You have to listen. You have to recite. You have to remember. Mnemosyne. Just as a point, keep in mind that, at least according to the text itself, Homer was blind, which means that the Iliad and the Odyssey were not written by Homer. They were transcribed. He was a poet. How did he do it? Mnemosyne. A long time ago, I played the part of a teacher. And there was one mantra I used to bang into my students' heads. Mastery is equal to repetition times time. M equals R times T. That's it. Now, if I knew more about myth back then, I would have told them the story of Mnemosyne. I didn't. Now, at this point, I have to address my amazing editor, once again, who snarkily at this point said, "May I suggest that M equals RT ensures rote learning, but achieves little in terms of understanding." I'm so glad he said that. I am so glad he said that, because that forced me to think. So I'm not going to respond with my own kind of snark here. Before you think outside the box, you need to know the the nature of the box. And if you're really, really clever, you might actually figure out what could be in the box. Though that will always be the great mystery. Mnemosyne hides in the box. Some people are gifted in certain areas. They don't have to worship as much as the rest of us at the altar of the Titaness. I have to. And that's okay. Because at least I know the secret. Now you know the secret too. Mnemosyne hides in the box. And this secret has been repackaged in more contemporaneous manners by writer, author, speaker Malcolm Gladwell in his book Outliers. And he talks about the 10,000 hour rule, which is his way of saying that, if you want to master any subject, you're going to spend about 10,000 hours of practice. M equals R times T is just a simplification of that. I give Mr. Gladwell props for the idea. I was just reducing it. I don't think Mnemosyne or any of her daughters would take objection to that. And I think maybe that's part of the problem we have right now in our culture is that, no, everyone wants the goods. No one wants to put in the 10,000 hours. It takes work. Even if you're gifted, even if you have natural proclivities, it takes work to master your craft. And when all the work you're doing is just thinking about all the great things that are going to happen when you've mastered your craft, instead of putting the work into it, you ain't going to get there. How do we remember this goddess of memory? Very scantily. Most of the goddesses of the Titan era, at least according to modern scholarship, at best became oracles. And that is exactly what happened to Mnemosyne. She is an oracular goddess. And she also has a place in hell. As an oracular goddess, she had worship sites at the Athenian shrine of Dionysus. And this is all from Pausanias, from the 2nd century Common Era, his description of Greece. In the Arcadian town of Tegea, the Helicon mountain sanctuary, and most importantly, in Levadia in Boeotia. I might be massacring these names. I apologize. Here, Pausanias goes into pretty good detail. So I'll read this. Part of the rituals of the oracle of Trophonius. He, the supplicant, is taken by the priests, not once to the oracle, but to the fountain of water very near to each other. Here he must drink water called the water of Lethe, forgetfulness, that he may forget all that he has been thinking of hitherto. And afterwards he drinks of another water, the water of Mnemosyne, which causes him to remember what he sees after his descent. After his ascent from the oracle of Trophonius, the inquirer is again taken in hand by the priests, who set him upon a chair called the chair of Mnemosyne, which stands not far from the shrine, and they ask him, when seated there, all he has seen or learned. After gaining this information, they then entrust him to his relatives. These lift him, paralyzed with terror and unconscious both of himself and his surroundings, and carry him to the building where he lodged before with Tyche and the daimon Agathon, good spirits, fortune for Tyche. Afterwards, he will recover all his faculties, and the power to laugh will return to him. I like that. Memory and the power to laugh. This is paralleled in her descriptions of her role in the underworld in Hades. There is a river there called Lethe, and a pool of remembrance called Mnemosyne. These can be traced back to 4th century BCE funerary writings. The departed would drink from Lethe so as to forget their past lives when reincarnating. Part of the Orphic mysteries were instructions to forsake drinking from Lethe and drink instead from the pool of Mnemosyne, so as to remember their previous incarnations and prevent the transmigration of their souls. So, Mnemosyne matters. So what is the takeaway? Another quote here, and this is from The Life of Apollonius of Tyana by Philostratus from the 2nd century, 1st to 2nd century Common Era. When he, Apollonius of Tyana, reached the age of 100, he still surpassed Simonides in point of memory, and he used to chant a hymn addressed to Mnemosyne, in which it is said that everything is worn and withered away by time, whereas time itself never ages, but remains immortal because of memory. So what's the real takeaway? Never forget to remember. You can't know the box until you know you can't think outside the box until you know the box. Mnemosyne hides in the box. Perhaps Mnemosyne is the box. Know the box. And then dare to dream outside of it, beyond it, vastly. But you gotta know the box first. And I'm afraid, now I'm going off script, but I am afraid in the age of ChatGPT and AI, we've really come to a point where nobody thinks the box matters anymore. You can't think outside the box unless you know it. Stay educated. Have a blessed day. Once again, feel free to like, subscribe, and hit that bell. I'm Shiva, this is Mythcrafts, and thank you for your time. Mnemosyne.